All right, so you want to dive deep into cryptocurrency wallets, huh? Well, buckle up because today we're all about security. And trust me, when it comes to crypto, that's where things get really interesting.
Yeah, it's a wild world out there.
We're talking billions, literally billions of dollars lost. Because let's face it, keeping your crypto safe, it's not as simple as, just hiding some cash under your mattress.
It really is fascinating when you think about it. You have this incredible technology, this whole cryptocurrency ecosystem built on cryptography, complex systems designed to be, well, virtually unbreakable.
Right. It's supposed to be this Fort Knox of finance.
Exactly. But then you see how people are actually storing and managing it. And, well, let's just say it's a little ironic.
It's like hiding your house key, right under the welcome mat.
Exactly.
A bold move, to say the least. In fact, our research actually points out over 16.7 billion.
Wow.
Billion with a B
Yeah.
have vanished since 2011
Wow.
due to security breaches involving these wallets.
And they're not all small potatoes either. Remember that Mt. Gox attack way back when? 2011?
Oh, yeah.
850,000 Bitcoins gone. Just poof.
It's just like that.
Harsh reminder that even the big players, the ones that seem untouchable, vulnerable.
Okay, so before we get too deep into the spooky stories, let's clarify something. When we say cryptocurrency wallets, what exactly are we talking about?
Imagine like a digital key ring.
Yeah.
But instead of unlocking your front door, each key on this ring, it gives you access to your crypto assets, a specific chunk of it on the blockchain.
Okay.
Lose the key, you lose access. And potentially, you lose your crypto.
So, if my phone dies and it has my crypto wallet app, that's it. Game over. My crypto is lost in the digital abyss.
It's a little more nuanced than that.
Okay.
But essentially, yeah. And that's where understanding the different types of wallets and all their little quirks becomes really, really important. We've got to talk about custodial versus non-custodial, and then we'll dive into that whole hot and cold wallet spectrum.
Okay, so many terms. Let's start with custodial versus non-custodial. I'm guessing it's all about who's actually holding these digital keys, right?
You got it. Custodial wallets, they're kind of like your traditional bank. They hold your crypto for you. Convenient, right?
Yeah.
But just like a bank, you're putting your trust in that third party.
And as we've learned from, cases like Mt. Gox, that trust can definitely backfire.
Oh, yeah.
So what's the alternative?
Non-custodial wallets. This is where you hold the keys. Complete control, complete responsibility. It's the epitome of be your own bank.
Right.
You hear that a lot in the crypto world, but
Sounds empowering, but also kind of terrifying. Like, what happens if I lose my phone? Or worse, I forget my password.
oh yeah,
There's no password reset for this stuff, right?
you're catching on quickly. And
Yeah.
that's just scratching the surface. We also need to consider the difference between hot wallets and cold wallets.
Okay, hit me with it. What makes a wallet hot or cold?
All right, think of it this way. A hot wallet is like your smartphone. It's connected to the internet, it's always on, always ready for a transaction, super convenient for everyday use. But just like your phone can be vulnerable to hacks or malware, so can a hot wallet.
Okay, so what's the offline equivalent in the wallet world?
That's where cold wallets come in. These are like your high security vault, tucked away offline, far less susceptible to those digital threats lurking on the internet.
All right, so there's a theme here. Convenience versus security.
Yeah.
Hot wallets for quick transactions, cold wallets for the big bucks, and a whole lot to unpack in between.
Exactly. And the good news is there's a whole spectrum of wallet infrastructure options to choose from within those categories. We're talking software wallets, hardware wallets, even paper wallets.
Paper wallets. Okay, now you're just messing with me. Do people actually print out their crypto keys and stash them in a safe?
You'd be surprised. It might seem a little, old school, but for those looking for serious offline storage, especially for large amounts, paper wallets, they offer that tangible disconnected security.
Yeah, I guess I can see the appeal in that.
It's like the difference between keeping your life savings in a bank versus burying gold bars in your backyard.
Okay.
Different approach, different level of risk.
Right. I get it. Okay, but let's back up a bit because I think most people, myself included, are probably more familiar with software wallets.
Absolutely. Software wallets are incredibly common, and for good reason. They're user-friendly, accessible, from your phone, your computer. Transactions are a breeze. You've got web wallets that you can access through a browser, mobile wallets for on the go, and even desktop wallets for, those who prefer a dedicated application on their computer.
Okay, so convenience is the name of the game with these software wallets. But that also means they're constantly connected to the internet, right?
Right.
Which brings us back to that hot wallet vulnerability we were discussing earlier.
Precisely. And those vulnerabilities, they can be exploited through what we call application attacks.
Application attacks.
Yeah, and these can be as simple as someone designing a malicious app
Okay.
that looks legit, but it's actually designed to steal your keys.
Oh, wow. So it's not just about protecting my physical device. It's also about making sure the software itself is trustworthy.
Exactly. And this is where things get even more technical. Think about those software libraries, those building blocks that developers use to create these applications.
Okay.
If there's a flaw in one of those libraries, it could leave thousands of wallets vulnerable.
Wow. Okay, so now I'm starting to get a little paranoid about my crypto wallet app. Is there any way to, like, avoid these risks entirely?
Not entirely. But that's where hardware wallets come in. They add an extra layer of security by storing those private keys on a separate physical device, often with additional security features like PIN codes or biometric authentication.
So it's like having a mini Fort Knox for my crypto keys.
Exactly. And because these devices are usually offline, they're much less susceptible to those online attacks. Think of it like this. If someone wants to break into your house, it's a lot harder if they have to get through a locked door and a security system, right?
Yeah, that makes sense. But this all sounds pretty high-tech. Are hardware wallets user-friendly? Or do I need, like, a degree in cryptography to figure one out?
Well, they've come a long way in terms of usability. Many hardware wallets now, they've got intuitive interfaces, and they connect easily to your computer or your smartphone. And the peace of mind they offer, especially if you're holding significant amounts of crypto, is often worth that initial learning curve.
Okay, that's reassuring. So we've got software, hardware, even paper, but they all have one job: to protect those precious crypto keys. But how do we protect those keys from the wallets themselves? Our research mentions something about faulty libraries. What exactly are those?
Imagine a house, but it's built on a foundation with cracks in it.
Okay.
A faulty library, it's like that. It's a piece of code used by many different wallets that has a hidden vulnerability. So even if your wallet seems secure on the surface, if it's relying on this faulty code, it's vulnerable.
So it's like a backdoor that attackers can just, sneak in through, even if the wallet itself seems secure.
Exactly. And the scary part is, these vulnerabilities, they often aren't discovered until it's too late. Someone's already exploited it. That's why it's so important to choose wallets from, reputable developers, developers who prioritize security, who conduct regular audits of their code.
Okay, noted. Choose wisely. Trust, but verify. But let's talk about the attacks themselves. What kind of threats are we actually facing here?
Our source breaks it down into 4 main types: network attacks, application attacks, blockchain attacks, and authentication attacks.
Okay, so let's break those down. Starting with network attacks, what are we up against here?
Imagine you're sending a postcard,
Okay.
okay, and it has your crypto keys written on it.
Not a good idea, by the way.
Terrible idea. But bear with me. A network attack is like someone intercepting that postcard, reading your keys, and then delivering it to the intended recipient, like nothing happened.
So they're eavesdropping on my crypto conversations.
Essentially, yes.
That's creepy.
Yeah, it is. One example is what we call a man-in-the-middle attack, a MITM attack, for short.
Okay.
This is where an attacker inserts themselves between your wallet and the network, essentially becoming the middleman in the conversation.
So instead of my crypto going to my friend, it ends up in the attacker's wallet.
That's exactly what could happen.
That's infuriating.
It is. It really highlights why using secure Wi-Fi networks and being cautious about public Wi-Fi is so crucial when you're dealing with cryptocurrency. Another example is a DNS attack.
DNS.
Yeah, remember how we access websites using those domain names like google.com?
Right.
Well, a DNS attack is like someone tampering with the address book of the internet. So when you try to access your wallet, you're redirected to a fake website controlled by the attacker.
So it's like being tricked into going to a fake bank website.
Exactly.
You think you're logging into your account, but you're actually handing over your info to the bad guys.
Exactly. And then there are denial of service attacks, DDoS attacks.
DDoS.
Yeah, imagine a swarm of bees, but they're digital. And they're flooding your online storage, overwhelming your servers, preventing anyone from actually making purchases.
So they're essentially shutting down the system.
Yeah, to cause chaos and disruption.
Right. But how does that translate to stealing crypto?
Well, imagine that swarm of bees attacking a cryptocurrency exchange. They could prevent users from accessing their accounts or withdrawing funds or even executing trades. And in all that chaos, it creates opportunities for attackers to exploit vulnerabilities and potentially steal funds.
That's terrifying. It sounds like these network attacks, it's all about exploiting those connections between our wallets and the wider internet.
Precisely. And it highlights why having a good understanding of network security and taking precautions, like, using a VPN, especially on public Wi-Fi, is so important in the crypto world.
Okay, so network attacks, they target the infrastructure. What about those application attacks you mentioned earlier? Is that where things get a little more, shall we say, personal?
You could say that.
Okay.
Application attacks, they focus on exploiting vulnerabilities in the software itself. And often, they rely on human error to be successful.
Oh, no. You're going to mention phishing scams, aren't you?
Had to.
Because, let's be honest, we've all been tempted to click on that "you've won a free cruise" link at some point, right?
It's a classic for a reason.
It is.
Phishing scams, they're incredibly effective, and attackers are always finding new ways to make them even more convincing.
So how do they work in the crypto world? Are they sending emails pretending to be from, like, exchanges or wallet providers?
Exactly. They might send you an email that looks identical to one from, say, your exchange, urging you to update your account information, maybe reset your password. And if you're not careful, you might just click on that malicious link and, well, you've just handed over your login credentials without even a second thought.
Okay, that's scarily easy to fall for.
It is. And it's not just emails. They might create fake social media accounts or even set up fake websites that look identical to the legitimate ones.
So it's all about being vigilant, double-checking those URLs, and never clicking on links from sources we don't recognize.
Absolutely. Trust your gut. If something feels off, it probably is.
Okay, so phishing is all about tricking users, but you mentioned that application attacks, they can also exploit vulnerabilities in the software itself. What are some examples of that?
Remember those faulty libraries we discussed earlier?
Yeah.
Those can be a major entry point for attackers.
Okay.
If a wallet app is using a library with a known vulnerability, an attacker could exploit that flaw to gain access to users' funds, even if the wallet's own code is well written.
So it's like having a state-of-the-art security system installed in your house, but then leaving a window open by mistake.
That's a great analogy. And just like with physical security, every layer matters in the digital world.
All right, this is getting pretty intense. We've got network attacks exploiting our connections, application attacks targeting our software and our own human weaknesses. It's like a digital minefield out there. So we've covered network and application attacks, but our research also mentioned something about blockchain attacks. Hold on. I thought the blockchain was supposed to be this unhackable fortress. How can something that's tamper-proof be vulnerable?
You're right. The blockchain itself, it's incredibly secure. But it's not entirely immune to attacks. Think of it like this. Even the strongest castle, it can have weaknesses, right? Maybe in its design, its construction.
Okay, that makes sense. So what kind of weaknesses are we talking about here?
Well, one example is what we call a smart contract vulnerability.
Smart contract vulnerability.
Yeah, smart contracts are basically self-executing contracts,
Okay.
written in code that lives on the blockchain.
Okay.
They're used for all sorts of things, from automating transactions to creating those, complex financial instruments.
So instead of having a lawyer drop a contract, we have these like little pieces of code doing the heavy lifting. That's pretty amazing, but also a bit scary if they can be hacked.
Exactly. And just like any code, smart contracts can have, bugs, vulnerabilities. And if an attacker finds one of these flaws, they can potentially exploit it to, well, steal funds or manipulate the contract in their favor.
So it's like finding a loophole in a legal contract, but with potentially disastrous consequences.
Exactly. One famous example is the DAO hack back in 2016. The DAO, or Decentralized Autonomous Organization, was this revolutionary project built on the Ethereum blockchain.
Okay.
It was basically a venture capital fund run entirely by code.
Wow.
But a critical vulnerability in its smart contract allowed an attacker to drain millions of dollars worth of ether.
Wow, that's a stark reminder that even the most, cutting-edge tech can be vulnerable if the code isn't bulletproof. Are there other types of blockchain attacks we should be aware of?
Absolutely. Another one is a 51% attack.
A 51% attack? That sounds ominous, like something out of a dystopian sci-fi movie. What does that even mean?
Imagine a group of, let's say, malicious actors. They gain control of more than half of the computing power on a blockchain network. With that much power, they could potentially rewrite the transaction history, double spend coins, or even, halt the entire network.
Wait, so someone could potentially just rewrite the rules of the game if they had enough computing power. That seems like a fundamental flaw.
It's a theoretical risk.
Yeah.
And it's much more difficult to pull off on, on those larger, more established blockchains like Bitcoin or Ethereum,
Okay.
the amount of computing power you'd need makes it incredibly expensive and challenging for attackers.
Right.
But it's still a risk, especially on smaller, less established blockchains, those with fewer participants.
Okay, so blockchain attacks might be less common, but the consequences, yeah, they can be catastrophic. And then there's that final category, those authentication attacks we briefly touched on earlier. What are some common tactics that these attackers use to try and, well, bypass these authentication measures?
Think of it this way. Authentication, it's all about verifying your identity.
Right.
It's like the digital equivalent of, showing your ID to get into a club.
Okay.
Attackers are constantly trying to find ways to forge those fake IDs, sneak past the bouncer, and get access to your precious crypto.
So what are some of their go-to moves?
Brute force attacks, they're a classic.
Right.
It's basically a digital guessing game. They try every possible combination of characters until they crack your password. Might sound tedious, but with enough computing power, it'd be really effective, especially if your passwords are weak or, you're using the same one across multiple accounts.
Okay, so strong and unique passwords are a must. What else?
Dictionary attacks are another one.
Okay.
Instead of those random combinations, they use lists of common words, phrases, passwords that have been, leaked in those previous data breaches.
So if I'm using password 123 to protect my crypto, I'm basically handing them the keys to the kingdom.
Pretty much. You're making it way too easy for them.
Okay, good to know.
And then there are even more sophisticated attacks, like side channel attacks.
Side channel attacks, those sound even more, shall we say, cloak and dagger. What are those all about?
Imagine a thief trying to break into a safe, right? But instead of trying to crack the combination directly, they use a stethoscope. And they're listening to those subtle clicks of the tumblers as you turn the dial.
Oh, sneaky.
That's kind of what a side channel attack does. They're looking for those subtle leaks of information, those digital footprints we leave behind as we interact with our devices or software.
They're like digital detectives looking for those tiny clues to piece together our private keys. This has been a wild ride. We've covered everything from network attacks to application vulnerabilities to those, cloak and dagger side channel attacks. It's clear that there's no shortage of threats facing our crypto.
That's why it's so crucial to be informed, to understand those risks, and take those steps to protect yourself. Be proactive.
Speaking of being proactive, we've talked a lot about the threats, but let's shift gears and talk about defense strategies. Our listeners need to walk away from this deep dive, armed with practical advice on how to actually keep their crypto safe.
Absolutely. And the good news is, many of these strategies are surprisingly straightforward.
Okay.
It's all about establishing good security habits and following some basic best practices.
Okay, let's talk specifics. What are some of the most effective ways to protect our crypto wallets?
First and foremost, strong, unique passwords.
Yeah.
Non-negotiable.
Okay.
And I can't emphasize this enough. Don't reuse passwords.
Yeah.
If one of your accounts is compromised, you don't want to give them the keys to your entire digital life.
One key to rule them all. Might sound good in a fantasy novel, but in real life, recipe for disaster.
And enable two-factor authentication wherever you can. It adds that extra layer of security by requiring a second form of verification, like a code from your phone or an email, in addition to your password. It might seem, like a small inconvenience, but it can make a huge difference in protecting your accounts.
Two-factor authentication, got it. What else?
If you're dealing with larger amounts of crypto, consider using a hardware wallet for that offline storage.
Okay.
We talked about, how those are like your digital vault.
Right.
They offer that extra layer of protection because they're not always connected, making them much less susceptible to those online attacks. So for everyday transactions, stick with a reputable software wallet. Strong security features. But for those bigger holdings, consider going the extra mile.
Got it. Any other tips for choosing a trustworthy wallet in the first place?
Do your research. Look for wallets that have been independently audited by, reputable security firms. An audit is basically a thorough inspection of the code.
Okay.
They're looking for any of those vulnerabilities. It's not a guarantee of perfect security, but it's a good indicator that the developers, they're taking security seriously.
So audited wallets, check. What about all those phishing scams we talked about? Any tips for avoiding those?
Be wary of any unsolicited emails, messages, especially those asking for sensitive information like your crypto keys or passwords.
Right.
Legitimate companies will never ask for that information over email or, direct messages. Always double check that sender's address. Look for typos, any inconsistencies,
Yeah.
and just be cautious about clicking on links in those emails or messages,
Yeah.
even if they seem legit.
Right.
If you're not sure, it's always best to err on the side of caution. Maybe visit the company's website directly or contact their customer support, but through official channels.
Trust but verify.
Exactly.
Any other advice on how to just stay ahead of the scammers and protect our digital assets?
Stay informed. The crypto world is constantly changing. New threats emerge all the time.
Right.
Keep up to date on the best practices. Follow those reputable security researchers, news sources, and be aware of those common tactics that these attackers use.
Yeah.
It's like the game of cat and mouse, right?
Yeah.
As the security measures evolve, so do the tactics.
We need to be one step ahead.
Exactly. And remember, no security system is foolproof. We're all human, we make mistakes, but by, taking these precautions, by staying informed and vigilant, we can really reduce our risk and, protect ourselves in this exciting but often unpredictable world of cryptocurrency.
This has been an incredible deep dive. We explored the different types of cryptocurrency wallets, we unpacked those various threats facing our assets, and we armed ourselves with practical strategies for staying safe in this ever-evolving landscape.
It's been a pleasure. Hopefully, our listeners walk away feeling a little bit more informed, a little bit more empowered.
Absolutely. And remember, knowledge is power, especially in the world of cryptocurrency. Stay curious, stay vigilant, and keep exploring. That's all the time we have for today's deep dive. Until next time, keep those crypto wallets safe and sound.